Okay, councillors, we're just doing a test on audio and visual. Testing, 1, 2, 3, testing. Can you hear us? Over and out.
It's been a while. Oh, no, Alan's only the second.
Okay, thank you, councillors. I'd like to declare the ordinary meeting of Blayney Shire Council for June open, and thank you all very much for your attendance. Just a reminder that this meeting is being live streamed, and as such you will be recorded as part of the proceedings here this evening. Councillors, in opening this meeting, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet, being the Wiradjuri people, and pay my respects to the elders both past, present and emerging. Councillors, we do have a couple of apologies. We have Councillor Ewan has a approved apology for this meeting, but we do have a late apology for Councillor Price-Jones. Could I have a mover that apology be accepted? Councillor Goswich has moved that way. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Newstead has seconded that. I'll put that motion. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? I declare that carried. Councillors, disclosures of interest. Have we any disclosure of interest here this evening? I do have one. I have a disclosure of interest from our General Manager, Mark Dicker. The day of the meeting is tonight. Item number 4, page number 10, and the reason for the interest is that Mr Dicker highlights the property in which he resides is in close proximity, approximately 820 metres away, to the culvert upgrade and improvement works at Richards Lane, Millthorpe, which is now proposed to be undertaken in 23-24. It's a non-pecuniary interest and it's less than significant. Councillors, is there any other disclosure of interest here this evening? Okay, if not, we'll move through. We have no public forums. I have no mayoral minutes, no notice of motion. Can I draw your attention to the confirmation of the minutes of the ordinary council meeting held on the 6th of the 6th, 23. Can I have a mover? That is a true record. Thank you, Councillor Somervale. Second, Councillor Goswich. I'll put that motion. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Declared carried. Councillors, any matters arising from those minutes? Just quickly looking through them again myself. Everyone happy? Thank you. Moving now through to page 5, item 2. And these are questions taken on notice at the previous council meeting held on the 6th of June 23. There's a recommendation there. Councillors, do I have a mover for this recommendation? Thank you. Councillor Goswich has moved that way. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Newstead has seconded that. Councillors, any questions, comments on these? Councillor Somervale?
Yeah, just one clarification, I guess, in relation to question 1, which is my question in relation to the cross-subsidy charge on the sewer bills. The comment there is that we will... the result of it is we leave the cross-subsidy at $55, which is what the DSP says, without it being indexed for CPI. I agree with that. But the comment there is that we will leave it there until there's a planned holistic review of the DSP in the future. That may be the case, but I would like to keep that under scrutiny over the next few years, and if our number of equivalent tenements or new lots far exceeds what the DSP predicted, which was I think 7 a year, then I'd like to think that we would go back to DPE to get their approval to increase the cross-subsidy charge to bring it more in line with reality.
Right, no, thank you, very appropriate. Thank you, Councillor Somervale. Councillors, any further questions or comments? We have a mover, we have a seconder. I'll put the motion. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Declared carried. Move now through to page 8. Item 3, Tourism Development Program Application. There's a recommendation there. Councillors, do I have a mover? Thank you. Councillor Reynolds has moved that way. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Goswich. Councillors, questions or comments in regards to this item? Everyone happy? Seems pretty reasonable. No questions or comments. I will put the motion. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Declared carried. Councillors, now move through to page 10, item 4, the adoption of the 23-24 and 26-27 delivery program and 2023-24 operational plan. So recommendations there. 1 to 8. Like to move those recommendations. So I have a seconder. Thank you. Councillor Newstead has seconded that. Councillors, I'd just like to make a couple of quick comments. One being I'd like to acknowledge and thank the staff, the effort that has gone into preparing the operational plan and delivery plan. I'd also like to recognise my fellow councillors, also in the work and the workshops and the meetings and the consideration that you've all given to this, what is our most important document of the year. Thirdly, I'd also like to recognise the community and the feedback that we did receive. Having 5 community submissions, I think, is almost a record. And it's great if I can draw your attention to 3 where the submissions have been responded to and how they've been responded to are in number 3. But I do thank the community for that engagement, and we do appreciate those submissions, and I'm happy to say that I think council those submissions, and there they are in item in 3, A, B and C. I'd also like to draw the community's attention to and that is number 8, which is the endorsement or endorse the commencement of the special variation application process. And again, I thank councillors for the work and the effort that has gone into this to date. As the papers show, that we have undertook a strategic review and by Local Government Solutions, and we have had an internal committee looking at council's finances, and I think it's very appropriate that we continue down that path of looking at a special rate variation to engage appropriate consultants, do what we need to do to prepare a firm position that we can take to the community to engage the community about what an SRV may look like into the future. But also in looking at the operational plan, and again I thank the councillors for their commitment to, I think looks like over 75% of the CapEx will go back into our road network over the next 12 months, and I'm sure that would be well appreciated and received by our wider community. We do acknowledge the work that's already gone on in our road network, but this operational plan will see the continued investment in the upgrades and improvements of our road networks right throughout our shire. Councillors, have any questions or comments? Councillor Reynolds.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to add a point 9, as in I've gone and done some consultation.
Like an amendment, Councillor Reynolds?
Well, I suppose it is an amendment. So I do have a written one that one of the staff might like to take to the people doing our, and then I'll read it once it's over, and then we can wait for it to be typed up. So this number 9 is to do with the Village Enhancement Program. We were told at a recent workshop that any carryover funds would not be carried over. So I went and talked to a number of the village people, so for example Newbridge, Lyndhurst and Millthorpe, and the comment was, this is very short notice and we just cannot get quotes, and in particular I was talking to Sarah from Newbridge, who was saying it's impossible to get quotes before the 30th of this month for remaining funds. So hence I've put a number 9 in, that remaining money in each of the Village Enhancement Program funds be carried over for a period of 3 months into the new financial year. Each village or village committee be immediately approached to determine if they have projects within the village the funds may be designated for, or if there are footpath extensions or street lights, the money be used for that. Any remaining carryover funds after 3 months are to be returned to consolidated revenue. That was the feedback I had, was at least give us 3 months to get, if the council and this is the feedback again, if council had told us that the funding was going to cease, as in any carryover funding was going to cease on the 30th of June, then we would have acted sooner, but you only told us last week when I approached those three communities. One was at a village meeting in Millthorpe, and when I mentioned it, I was nearly hung. As in, there was quite a strong feeling, negative feeling, particularly as those funds have been used in the past and the communities have been told that the funding is being held for overruns in projects and not to use the funds. So, of course, they've sat each year waiting to see if there's been overruns. So, anyway, I'll wait for it to come up before I discuss it further.
Councillor Reynolds, we'll just allow a minute for it to come up so your fellow councillors can see the wording.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll just put up point 9 instead of putting the whole 8 up before it, if that's all right, Councillor Reynolds, just to facilitate the discussion. Okay, thank you, councillors. Councillor Reynolds' amendment there. Give it a second to read it. Okay, so Councillor Reynolds, I imagine you've spoken to it. I guess we could get a seconder.
A second.
That would be great, thank you.
I'm happy to second the amendment for the purpose of having a debate about it. There's a few issues I think need to have clarified about it, but I think it's important. It's an important issue and we need to at least have a debate about it.
Absolutely, thank you. Second, Councillor Somerville. Councillor Reynolds, you'd like to speak to it again?
Just, as in very briefly, to
now that we've got a seconder.
I've outlined, as in we were only recently told that there wasn't going to be a carryover. It will have no direct impact on the budget because the assumptions are it's all spent, but it will impact potentially on consolidated revenue because that's where it was going to go back into. When I approached those three villages, which actually have active village committees, just to ask if they could get some quotes, etc., for projects that they wanted to do, the comment back was that why weren't we told a period of time ago that carryover funds were no longer going to be carried over. Given all the time I've been on council, excess funds or remaining funds have been carried over. A lot of the villages, or some of the villages, are looking at bigger projects, and so we're hoping to sort of amass a larger amount for a project. Other villages just were sort of caught on the hop that they didn't realise it had to be spent by the 30th of June. So it's a new development, and it's putting on notice in 12 months' time that they have to spend the money, as in it can't stay there. But this is just an extension, a one-off extension for this current financial year, to allow those villages to either put forward projects, and I understand, for example, with Newbridge, that they have tried to get some quotes, but again, it's very, very difficult in the short period of time to get quotes and then to get council approval, if it's on council land, to actually make that expenditure possible. So the request has come back from the community, from those 3 villages, to see if there could be an extension of 3 months on this money that was in the past carried over, but it was also there for if projects ran over, they do, or to support projects. And I'll use an example: the cricket nets in Millthorpe. There was some money used for that, or in Lyndhurst with the tennis club lights, or the tennis court lights, some of the VEP money was used for that. In Mandurama, I believe, and I stand to be corrected, that some money was used to erect a shed at the tennis centre, but there are still carryover funds. The suggestion, and this came from Millthorpe, was if there is money left over, and Millthorpe does have, from what I understand from the 3rd quarter QBRS, so there may have been some money spent since, a reasonable amount of money to put a street light in on the corner of Glenorrey and Forest Reefs Road, and also to extend the footpath along there, in which there is currently no footpath, to use that money rather than losing it from the village. That was at the village meeting that occurred last week. So again, that's the feedback I've had from the community. I've listened as a councillor, and I've brought it back to council to see what council's opinion is of what the community has been asking with this 3-month extension. I'll leave it there, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Reynolds. Just a clarification, the 3 village committees are Millthorpe, Newbridge and
Lyndhurst.
And that was just recently, like in the last few days?
Last week, as in yesterday was Newbridge, and last week was both Lyndhurst and Millthorpe.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. There's just a couple of questions I think were pretty important issues to get clear thinking about this. One is confirmation from the staff that Councillor Reynolds is correct, that in previous years we've allowed a carryover of unspent money to be added to each year's fresh allocation, and that this is a change in policy. That's the first thing. And the second thing is, I think we need to have some understanding about how much money we're talking about here. And I don't know whether Councillor Reynolds is aware of that, or even if the staff can answer that for us right now, but if we're effectively, in making this amendment to the budget, anticipating some additional expenditure in the first 2 months, I think it was, or 3 months, then we really shouldn't decide on that without knowing exactly how much additional money might be spent in addition to the new VEP funds. So they're my 2 questions.
Thank you, Councillor Val. My understanding is that you're right. This is the first time that we've not rolled any excess money out of that VEP. Is that correct, Mr Director? We traditionally have rolled
through Mr Mayor,
VEP
that's
money
correct.
over.
Yes.
That is correct. So this would be a potential change of policy, barring, of course, Councillor Reynolds' amendment. So yes, this is not the usual way we handle the excess money in those plans. And secondly, the amount is, I think...
Sorry, through you, Mr Mayor, roughly 168,000 is the carryover at this point.
168,000?
Yes, so that's accumulated over a few years, I would imagine.
It's in excess of the annual allocation, yeah.
General Manager.
Through Mr Mayor, so on page 59 of I annotate is the CapEx program. So next year's VEP, actually, sorry, that's a year out. So 23-24 shows, so I'm now on page 57, shows village enhancement for 144,500 allocated for next year. That's a reset. That's a whole new set of money. When we're talking 168,000 for this year, that's because we've done so much work in those villages that they haven't needed to utilise and draw down on VEP. We've also used that on occasions where there's been slight overspends. We'd be looking to do that and utilise those funds for the Newbridge footpath. We're monitoring Elliott Street footpath at the moment. And it's council money essentially, and it's all our money, it's all of the community's money. It gets a reset on the 1st of July and of 145,000. Have we made a decision at this point in time? No, because the financial year is not ended. We're at council's direction.
Thank you. I think there's two answers to your two very good questions, Councillor Somerville. Yes, it is different, and there's a lot of money sitting there. Councillors, Councillor Newstead.
Just quickly through you, Mr Mayor, how many of the villages actually use the enhancement program?
Through you, Mr Mayor, quite a number. They do draw down on it quite regularly. In recent years, they haven't done so as much because we've had heightened grant funding, particularly on the stronger country communities and resources for regions, and done a lot. I'm aware Millthorpe have two projects underway at the moment, a bookcase and a notice board, which was funded, and a purchase order is raised. Most of the other villages have not really lent on it, quite frankly, that much, which is why it was mentioned that we should potentially return it to consolidated revenue, given there's a whole new stream of funding coming next week.
Yeah, no, Councillor Newstead.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. So is there a certain amount put aside for each village or community, or is it just when they put in a request, they get whatever they can get?
Mr. It varies. It varies. Some is allocated, like Blayney, for example, is allocated to the Platform Arts Hub, but there is a list basically showing an allocation.
But there's not a monetary value put on each committee?
The original one was about 30,000
Yeah,
when it
that's
first
what I was
started. Everybody
thinking,
got
yeah.
30,000, but as the GM said, it has changed
Yeah.
over the years. And of course, we had reconnecting community money, which was that 250,000, which flooded through the villages, and that in some ways probably took some of the necessity of accessing that fund. So I think there's plenty of good reasons why that money hasn't been accessed over the last 2 or 3 years, let alone COVID. So what we do though, we have an amendment to add here from Councillor Reynolds about giving those villages the opportunity, or the village residents, a 3-month grace, I like, before the other 150,000 kicks in, to potentially package up some other projects. I think that's the intent. Councillor Reynolds, pretty much.
You're asking a question, as in, again, I said I would bring it to council because there was, as in, when I alerted, they're the only 3 villages I'm aware that actually have active committees within the villages. But yeah, the comment was either, and as I think I just mentioned before, with Millthorpe at their village meeting, they said, well, look, put in a solar street light on the corner of Glenorrey and Forest Reefs Road. Put the footpath along until you run out of money, as in along Forest Reefs Road. That's because there is one potentially. It was put out in the amended active movement strategy, and that was one suggestion that came out of that meeting. If council wanted to, as in, if they've got to spend it quickly outside of projects. But again, they were looking at Redmond Oval, I believe, and the lighting of Redmond Oval, but I don't think the VEP money that's carried over plus the VEP money that's going to be distributed to Millthorpe on the 1st of July is anywhere near enough to even do a proportion of that project. And I don't think it's even been scoped yet. So some of the villages were looking. In Lyndhurst, the comment was, we want to do the curve and guttering in front of the hall. I forget the name of the street. But again, we're aware that curve and guttering is not going to solve the issue there, and so maybe they'd like it used in another project. Again, as in, I just quickly talked with that village, and again with Newbridge, they were looking at a number of projects and trying to get quotes. But they'd also been successful in Newbridge's case in getting some other government grant funding. I'm not quite sure what it was. There was no elaboration. And so they were unaware of the pressure to actually use this funding by the 30th of June. So hence, it's only a 3-month extension. It's not, as in, and if those villages can't find projects, then money goes back into consolidated revenue in 3 months' time. So that was what I was asked to put up by the communities, and that's what I've put up tonight, Mr. Mayor. So, as in, I support, as in, I go and listen to the communities, and that's what they've asked me to do. So, as a council representative, that's what I've moved as an amendment tonight. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Reynolds. There's certainly a couple of points there, isn't there, about the not actually directly related to your amendment. That's about what to do with that money, whether not roll over or continue to roll over, or from here on into the future go back into operation. That's another discussion, I think, for another day, I guess. What we have in front of us is the residual money that has been carried over for potentially a few years now, I would generally say. It's not just left over from the allocation from 22-23, it's actually left over from 3 or 4 or 5 years. That's why there's so much money sitting there, and the fact that these community groups have been able to access support from other areas, which has been great. So the opportunity that you're suggesting is for 3 months for any community groups to come back to council to access that residual money, yet what the GM said that there will be a reset as well, so there'll be more money as well into the new financial year. And I'm just saying that so I get it understood myself. Councillors, we have an amendment. Councillor Reynolds has spoken to it fairly well, I believe. Any other questions or comments? Councillor Somerville.
If I may be permitted to speak again, the thing that I'm grappling with is to try and work out what likely this will have on the budget for next year. I assume most of these projects are going to be capital projects, not operational sort of expenditure. So it's going to affect the capital budget, and therefore it's got to be funded, and it's going to give rise to some more depreciation. But we've got to make some sort of guess as to how much in this 3-month period will be accessed when otherwise it wouldn't have been accessed, because that's going to be the impact on the budget, and it's going to feed into the first QBRS next financial year, if in fact the villages avail themselves of tapping into the previous accruals. So it's very hard to make a decision without knowing quietly what's likely to happen, but we have to.
Yeah, look, there's no doubt there's some impacts that we're probably not quite aware of as by this amendment. I'm certainly thinking that potentially for the 3 months it's worth the opportunity to give those villages, even though I'm a bit at loss of what they might be, considering that I personally have had a lot of conversations with the villages the last 6 months, and it certainly hasn't been raised to me about projects. If anything, as the General Manager has touched on, certainly up to this point in time, most of the villages are reasonably happy with the projects they have achieved, and I'm sure they've got a wish list to attack the next round of funding. So I guess I'm thinking that another 3 months extension probably to see what might be used, but the bigger question is what we do going forward as far as that money, if there is any rollover, and indeed the impact on the capital, what those projects may or may not be, as Councillor Somerville has raised, is at this stage unknown. Councillor Newstead.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just quickly, so, like, if there's a lot of money there, somebody might come and put in a stupid request. Like, we still have the opportunity to veto any application that's put forward to us.
It'll be proportional. Each, I'd imagine, that
Yeah.
money split up between some villages may only have X amount of money left, and some villages might have a lot. I guess I'm assuming that's how it would be allocated. But the same process, the same rules and regulations would apply. I could see it'd be quite difficult to put something together within 3 months, but you never know. Councillor Reynolds has been talking to these committee and community members, and well, maybe they have. They haven't been talking to me or my fellow councillors. Mr. GM.
Mr. Mayor, can I just add a comment in response to Councillor Newstead's question there? Those projects would normally not come back to council. They're normally done under GM delegation. It's normally used for adds and odds, quite frankly. Some of the projects like the Lyndhurst one and that drainage issue, we just can't get there. You look at our projects highlights on page, I'm on 48/49 of the attachments, there's a long list next year where we are fully expended in terms of council resources, so we can't get there and do those jobs anyway, even if they are identified. I'm struggling here as well to try and process that, okay, if a job is identified, are we then going to prioritise it over the list that's in the approved DPOP? So there's a number of factors, and I don't think it's been drawn on because they haven't needed to draw on. We've had many conversations over the years that we've delivered a lot in the last few years, and it's one of the reasons we need to review our financial situation and our sustainability and address it. We are definitely out of want territory and into need territory because we have delivered so much, and I think our community acknowledges that. So, look, we need council's direction. It's up to you what you would like us to do.
Yeah, well, it's certainly caught me a bit off guard. It's a bit short notice.
If I'm permitted to speak again,
Yes, no, we're having a
I've
good discussion.
been tossing this over as we've been talking about it, and I am going to vote in favour of the amendment, I have to say. And I think the reason for that, I'm a bit reluctant because of the amount of money potentially involved in this, and given the state of our budget at the moment, that's not something which thrills me. But the reason I think we should support this is that it's a change in policy at the last minute of not carrying over the funds. And I must admit, at the workshop when we talked about the village enhancement funds ceasing and a new application coming up, I didn't realise that was a change of policy. I thought that was something we'd already done. And if that is a change in policy, then I think it's only fair that additional notice be given that funds which otherwise might be available were going to be cut off. So I think, as a matter of policy, I think I agree with the 3-month extension.
Thank you, Councillor Somervale. And I certainly tend to agree on your points about the changing or potential change of policy at this late notice. Just chatting to the General Manager, he's suggested, which I tend to agree, and I'd be asking Councillor Reynolds and Councillor Somervale's support on this, is that traditionally it has been rolled over for a full year. I think it's unrealistic to think that any projects of worthwhile would come up within 3 months, and I'd be afraid that there might be some knee-jerk reactions to spending that money. I would be probably more inclined to leave the status quo as it is and allow that money to roll through for the next 12 months and just allow the proper, thoughtful, constructive projects of our villages to come forward and potentially have that money, if there are bigger, legitimate projects that we can support with that extra money, that would be the time. I think we all know the lead time for some projects takes a long time. And I think 3 months, even though I appreciate the sentiment, Councillor Reynolds, I think thinking about it and taking on board Councillor Somervale's very good comments about this is the status quo. This is what we've traditionally done. So I think if you would be happy
I'm
to
happy
consider
to
that
roll
suggestion.
it for the next 12 months, but as in, again, and we probably need as a council to talk about whether we then conclude and say, okay, if in 12 months' time, funds that are left, you lose, as in they go back into consolidated revenue, but we tell the community well in advance.
Yeah, look, I appreciate all that, and it will be a conversation to have, but I think at the end of the day, Alice summed it up very well, in fact, that this is the status quo, and at the 11th hour, it's probably not worth changing. So I'm just wondering if we could potentially slightly change Councillor Reynolds' words, program to enhance program funds to be carried over for the year 23-24.
We can then get rid of the rest of the...
Yes, I think it carried over for the next financial year, and I don't think we need anything
That's
else.
right, yeah, I agree, as in remove the rest. Yep. Mr Mayor, just to elaborate why I had the rest on that was what I was told, for example, from Millthorpe, as in tell the council to do this, so I was relaying the message.
Everyone's got their pet projects, that's for sure. But this will give us some more time to... where we might see less and less external funding.
That's the problem. Grant funding.
Okay, thank you, councillors. We now have an amendment which will add to the existing. That's number 9, that the remaining money in each of the village enhancement program funds be Councillors, any other questions or comments before I put the amendment? Against? Then carried. The amendment now becomes part of the original.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and coming in support of your comments on recommendation number 8 with regard to a review looking potentially at a special rate variation as one option, but to actually review and look at the costs of running council and we have for I suppose at least the last 6 months, 7 months, 8 months been looking at operating costs. So it's important that, as in to tell our community, and in looking through the budget, as in some line items like Centrepoint, and I don't think a lot of people realise, so the aquatic centre and the gym, etc., and the basketball courts, cost council after revenue well over or just over $1 million a year, and part of that is depreciation. A lot of that is actual running costs of that facility, whether it's electricity, it costs a lot to heat that facility in winter. And so the community has got to be asked, as part of this consultation, are they happy to continue to operate it? As in, so how do we fund it? With a budget deficit forecast of over $1 million, that could go either way, depending on our subsidiary businesses, I suppose you could say, as in Central Tablelands Water and Upper Macquarie, on how they perform in the next financial year. But as in, it's not looking good from a budget point of view, and we as councillors are privy to the next 10 years as opposed to this 4-year delivery program, and it's not looking good for the next 10 years. So we seriously have to look and try and get back towards break even, if not a little bit in the black, rather than being in the red, and most of those 10 years are substantially in the red from a profit and loss point of view. So fully support the investigation. The the analysis of looking at a special rate variation. Hopefully there won't be the necessity to go as big or anywhere near as big as some of the other councils that have just successfully achieved special rate variations across the state. So hopefully our special rate variation will be a lot smaller, but again at this stage we don't exactly know, and so as the budget says, we're getting consultants to actually review and start the process to examine this and fully examine it. But so fully support that particular recommendation and the rest of the recommendations in the operation plan and the delivery program for the next 4 years. But our community must be aware that, as in, our facilities cost a lot to run. And, you know, looking at our parks and gardens and sports fields, I think that's over $1 million again there just to run those sporting fields and keep them to a good standard so our teams and community groups can enjoy, whether it's King George Oval or Redmond Oval or even some of the smaller ovals such as Lyndhurst, the rec ground at Lyndhurst, etc., and at Newbridge, as in something pretty well for every village where you're looking after those villages. You're mowing the roadsides, etc., as in the approaches to our villages. All cost money. And so the community, if we want to live in a great community, and we do, and we're enhancing it, and that's, you know, things like in the program, continuing to upgrade our roads, and we have been hit very hard with our roads, but again, a very big delivery program over the next couple of years with roads to try and get them back to a good status. So fully support the budget. Hopefully there is some more grant funding still to come out there to further enhance our roads, but we've got to communicate with the community and tell them exactly what it costs to run council, and may I commend the General Manager for the two-pager that we did put out to actually highlight to the community, and I've had a lot of good positive feedback about those 2 pages, to highlight our expenditure and our projects, etc. But it was kept simple rather than this very long document that we're passing tonight, so the community can understand what we're proposing, but also some of the challenges, and this is a big challenge on getting enough revenue to continue to operate this council sustainably. So fully support the OPDP that we're putting up tonight, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Reynolds. The snapshot which the staff developed was very well received. You're absolutely spot on. It was pretty well received outside of the Shire. A lot of councils thought that was a really great idea to engage the community with a really simple, high-level document. Councillors, we have a mover, we have a seconder. Any question? Councillor Newstead.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a quick question maybe to the General Manager. As far as the submissions go, how are they responded to? Are they just send a letter back explaining what's going on, or somebody speak to them personally, or how's that happen?
Through Mr. Mayor, all of those submissions were via email, so we will respond to them, and given there's only 5, we can send them a direct email and they can give me a call if they need to.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Newstead. Okay, councillors, any further questions or comments? Councillor Somerville.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to say briefly something in relation to item 8, which is, I think, the most important paragraph in this resolution, the special rate variation paragraph. Council has seen the problem coming for a couple of years now. It's not got better, it's got worse. During the course of the financial year now finishing, we commissioned experts to have a look at what we could be doing, and we got an extensive report on that. We then took that forward with an analysis of, I think it was 24 individual action items we could do to improve our position, looking at solvency, profitability and long-term sustainability. And we have been chipping away at those, and some of those have been incorporated into the budget that we're about to approve. But that's just chipping away at the edges. You've only got to look at page 24 of the business paper, the red line along the bottom of the page for the next 10 years, which I haven't done the maths, but it looks to me about on average $1 million every year for the next 10 years. you don't need to be a financial expert to realise that we can't continue that way. And unless we're going to make very severe cuts to the level of service we provide the community, and the community strategic plan suggests the other, the community wants the services to continue and wants the services to be enhanced. They want to live in a community that they're proud to live in, and so on. And they're proud to show people around our shire. Then, if that's going to continue, the only way we're going to be able to do that is with a special rate variation. And I think the report that came out in the business paper is an excellent explanation of just why we need to do this. And as Councillor Reynolds said, we don't know quite how much is going to be involved, but it'll have to be something. And we need to take the community on board, explain to them exactly what the position is, and get some feedback in relation to all the issues that will need to be addressed in our application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Somerville. Very well put, and I thank all my fellow councillors for acknowledging the situation as it is now and potentially into the future. Okay, councillors, we're still on this report. Any other questions or comments? If not, I'll put the motion. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Declared carried. Move now through to page 27, item 5, and that is report of council investments as at the 31st of May. Recommendations are 1 and 2. Do I have a mover for these recommendations? Councillor Goswich has moved that way. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Newstead, thank you. Councillors, any questions or comments about this report? Councillor Newstead.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just really quickly, it's good to see that there's not many investments there now that are below 1%. I think there's probably 2 or 3 left, and then most of them are all up around 4%, which has certainly boosted our cash flow. So that's really good. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Newstead. Councillor Reynolds.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A question probably through to the Director or CFO. The financial assistance grants in the past, and we're talking a month on from this report, as in the past we have seen some part of the financial assistance grants provided in June. Is there an indication that we will get any funds for financial assistance grants in June, or is it going to be delayed, as I think the federal government sort of indicated, till the new financial year? So I'm just, given we've only got a couple of days left in the financial year, are we seeing anything, or is there, as in...
That's an interesting question of the chance at Canberra last week. I believe they are expecting to give us 100%, I believe, of the financial assistance grants before the end of the start of the financial year. Is that correct?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we've had no confirmation yet, and we have certainly not received the funds.
Right, so it's a wait and see. Very close. We'll find out in the next couple of days. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Reynolds. Any questions, any further questions or comments? If not, I'll put the motion. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Declared carried. Page 32, item 6, road strategy review. Recommendation there, councillors. Strategy be endorsed. Do I have a mover? Thank you, Councillor Newstead. Do I have a seconder? Seconder in the room, Councillor Reynolds, I think got in first. Councillors, questions or comments in regards to the road strategy review? Yes, Councillor Reynolds.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Question through, with regard to the strategy, and it's a good strategy, covers a number of the major roads, particularly bitumen roads in the Shire. And I noticed, for example, I was at the Winter Solstice Festival in Newbridge on the weekend, and 2 sections of the road, one from the Marilda Road turnoff, coming in over the bridge there for about 1 kilometre, and then coming into the village for about the last kilometre before the village, there was a fair bit of, I don't know if the right word is slumping, but the sides were sort of going away, and it was fairly narrow. When you look at our DP, I don't think there's anything mentioned about Newbridge over the next 4 years. In the strategy, if there is grant funding, as in, can we potentially look at elevating, one of those, for example, in Newbridge, but there may be other areas on Barry Road or Neville Road or Mandurama Road, etc. Even though I think Mandurama Road may be in the DP, but to actually elevate or provide funding and look at those segments that are potentially, failing, and apply money rather than the 0 to, or number 1 to 50 or whatever the number of roads that are there. So just wondering if the director could clarify.
So, look, I'm sure that being a high-level strategy, there'd be opportunity to, depending on grant funding that's available, to actually address some of those issues. Mr. Director.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, certainly it's at Council's discretion where grant monies are spent. The road strategy is particularly important for upgrade works. Where there's deterioration of pavement, it's more for our heavy patching fund. In the same way, we still do try to apply for grants for those. So we recently were unsuccessful for fixing local roads of a section just outside Newbridge on Three Brothers Road. But certainly we're looking in those areas outside of this strategy for simple repairs.
Thank you, Mr. Director. Thank you, Councillor Reynolds. Councillors, road strategy. All pretty good? We have a mover, we have a seconder. I'll put the motion. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Declared carried. Now move through to page 34, item 7, minutes of the Traffic Committee meeting held on the 9th of June. Recommendations there 1 till 6. Do I have a mover for these recommendations? Councillor Newstead, thank you, has moved that way. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Goswich, thank you. I second that. Councillors, questions or comments in regards to the minutes of the Traffic Committee held on the 9th of June? Councillor Reynolds, you have a comment?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and a comment with regard to the high pedestrian area in Blayney. Hopefully the community can have a look, change from what was originally proposed, to include, to take it a bit further, and particularly with Henry Street and Farm Lane, but particularly Henry Street, to take it a bit further through there. So just a note that there has been the change and the feedback and councillor discussion to progress it. So I suppose a question with that high pedestrian area is sort of a time frame and I suppose it's pretty well comes down to funding. And this is what I know a lot of people in the community are going to ask in Blayney, as in may we see the 40 kilometre zone potentially come into being?
Mr. Director.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. There's Transport have expressed there's budget allocation in 23-24. That'll initially erect the signage. They're also looking to partially fund some of the blisters and gating, which we would do separately once we have the Blayney master plan detailed design.
Excellent. Good news. Thank you, Mr. Director. Thank you, Councillor Reynolds. Councillors, any other questions or comments in regards to the minutes of the Traffic Committee? All pretty straightforward. We have a mover, we have a seconder. I'll put the motion. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Declared carried. Okay, councillors, we do have one item to consider in closed committee. It's item 8, tender 06-2023, supply of quarry materials. This matter is considered to be confidential under section 10A(2)(c) of the Local Government Act, as it deals with information that would, if disclosed, confer a commercial advantage on a person with whom the council is conducting or proposes to conduct business. Can I have a mover that we go into closed committee? Councillor Goswich has moved that way. To have seconder. Thank you, Councillor Somervale. I'll put the motion. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. We'll now go into closed committee for consideration of item 8. quarry materials, bonus quarry materials, borrow. Councillors, that concludes our